introduction and mentioning my wife, Mary. I'll pass on the greeting, and I'll also say you have mentioned her in here. I hope next time, maybe when we have a physical meeting, I hope to bring her along with me. And thank you from the last session that we had. I am excited to hear that people got something out of it. And I particularly like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Actually, I've used it in so many things, and it's used in so many things like marketing, selling of goods. And if you go back and maybe research it, you see that it's more practical. It's very practical. Like at the very bottom, like I said last time, that is the basic needs, food, water. So what it says is if you have got food, water, your aspiration will be for the next needs, which are security needs, and that includes a house. When you have a house, you want love needs, so that's the next set, the third set of needs. So maybe you want to get married, or you want an association with other people, you want to belong to a certain group. After that, it's self-esteem, that's the fourth stage. So when you have satisfied this, you want at least to get maybe a certificate or something of that nature. The fifth one, which is the last one, is self-actualization. And it's when you have satisfied all this, maybe you want now to attain the highest office you can ever, or you want to fulfill your dream. So it's in a way more practical, though just like anything that is academic, where some people said no, maybe some people don't go through that route. They may decide to go hungry, but yet they are maybe looking at getting to a position, a powerful position. So that's also possible. So thank you so much. Let me just share the presentation for today. Would I be able to share that? Maybe allow me to. Okay, so today we are looking at decision-making in organization, and we'll take this organization as a church, because here we are learning theology. Now, life in itself, before we go into the main beef of this presentation, life itself is about decision-making. And if you also go to the Word, the Bible, like Prophet has said, sometimes we don't take the Bible as a more practical book. But if you look at it, I see the Bible as containing everything that is happening and giving out the solution of what is ever happening, be it in government, in our daily lives. You find a passage somewhere that talks about that particular thing and the solution. So the Bible is a more practical book, and life itself, like I said, is about decision making. From the time we wake up, we start making decision on whether I want to wake up or whether I don't want to wake up, whether to go to work, and if I'm going to work, what mode of transport should I take? That's decision making. In terms of food, what type of food maybe you want to eat, that's also decision making. As Apostle Brian has already asked question, I was meant to go through what we covered last time, but that has been appropriately done, so I will not go into that. But just to say that today, what we are going to do is we'll examine the different elements that contribute to decision making. In other words, we'll look at other things that should be considered when we are studying the process of decision making. We'll then also look at the different levels of managers and their information needs in any organization, whether it's small or big. If you have got more than 10 people, you have that structure where you have got different levels of management. And to explain, I know at some point you covered communication, which should have involved maybe a study of information and what it is used for in organization. But here we'll look at it in terms of decision making. We'll also explain the definition of decision making, and I'll also look at the various tools, although we want to go deep into them. Some of them are very basic and very practical. Some of them are a bit complicated, but we don't need to worry about that. We just need to know that there are those tools that can be used for decision making. Yes. So as we start the session today, maybe some questions worth asking ourselves is, the first one would be, what is decision making in organization? Why do we need to know the process of decision making as leaders or managers? And what are some of the elements that contribute to the process of decision making? So these are some of the questions that we need to have in the background as we go through this session. Some of the elements, just to lay the background, that contribute to decision making. I believe I talked about the first one in my last session, control, when I was talking about functions of managers or management, control. And I also touched a little bit on systems approach. I didn't touch on departmentation, but we'll look at it today. Organization structure, which is part of departmentation. I've already mentioned that we'll look at information in organization and the different levels of management. So these are some of the things that we need to grasp as we look at how the process of decision is executed or how you make decisions. So first of all, let's look at control. Okay, so the process of control is to make sure that things are being done in the right way. In other words, you impose control where you set boundaries, and the reason why you do it is to make sure that you are not going beyond your intentions in the organization. So the process of control starts with planning. So you plan what you need to control. After you plan, then you set standards. In some books, they talk about objectives, but maybe it's one or the same thing. So you set standards, and then having set standards, you go on to perform whatever it is that you need to perform. After you have performed that, then you measure it. Of course, in measuring, there would be some things that needs to be measured in quantitative form, some qualitative form, meaning that the answers when you have measured could be maybe in terms of mathematical results, or it could be just in terms of descriptive results. So you measure. After you have measured, The fourth stage is you compare. Now, comparing is you are comparing the results that you have got from performing the task against the standards that you had set at the very beginning, which is stage number 2. After that, then you see whether you are on course, meaning that the standards that you had set and what you have actually done, they match. If they don't match, then there will be need to rectify or correct. Yeah? So you impose some correction measures. In terms of organization, usually this is done in a systematic way, in that sometimes when you measure on stage number 3, the standards against actual performance, you have what we call standard deviation. Standard deviation gives room for some mistake, I would say. So you allow some, in terms of, say, for example, production, you know that when you are making something, you might have spillages, you might have some things that are substandard, but standard deviation allows you to say how many items you can allow that you would not need to take action. So in other words, you'd say, okay, if we are producing, our standard was to produce 5, but when we measured the actual that we produced 3. But our standard deviation is maybe 1. So 3, it means you have not done well, because standard deviation allows only 1 to miss out of the standard that you had set, meaning that if you produce 4, at least you say, no, we are still within range. Okay? So standard deviation, in other words, gives you an allowance to spell out the range where you want the results to be. So you have to give those allowances. The other thing to know on control is that in most books, they represent it only as 3 stages, which would be set standards, then measure, and the third one is correct. So the other stages that I've put there are just represented by these 3: set standard, measure, and correction. Okay, so and that's the best way maybe to remember the control process, remembering just the 3 stages. Now, in terms of control of human beings or staff, another word or term that you need to be aware of is what is called span of control. And span of control is just basically the number of subordinates reporting to one boss. Okay, there is an argument, but it depends on the type of work. That may be more than 10 to one boss is too much, but the other people say no. In some work settings, you can have 200 to one boss. It's possible. So it depends on the type of work. Departmentalization or departmentation, that's the division of the organization into manageable units. Church can also be divided into manageable units. You can have the choir department, you have the discipline, you can have the maybe midweek service committee, you can have chaplaincy that goes out, you can have evangelism department. I'm just giving an example. It depends on the size of the church and the type of church. Power and authority is another thing that we need to know in terms of control. And power is the ability to get things done, while authority is related to a position one occupies. So if you are given a position, ultimately you have some authority, while power is attained using different things. For example, you can get power using coerciveness. So if you are able to punish people, you can have that power, okay? Or you can be said to be powerful. If you are able to reward people, whether it's monetary wise or any other, you can give any other reward, then you have power. And some form of power is called legitimate power, positional power, where I've already mentioned that you get authority. So by being given a position, you have some power. So that is called legitimate power. Expert power is the power you get by being knowledgeable in a field, being an expert in a field. Accountants, because they know taxation, they would be in that category or as being powerful people. Different or personal power, this one, you get it in two ways. In some cases, it's because of association. Maybe your relative is the most powerful person someplace, so you get different power. Or personal power, which you get because of charisma, because of your personality. So people listen to you, people get things done when you say you want to have things done. Negative power is gained through some negative things that you can do. For example, strikes or industry action. That's some form of negative power. So if you are an expert, I don't know whether that is the right word, an expert in industrial strike, it means you have got some form of negative power. Okay? Or children is another example. They have power because they are able to disrupt things. So negative power, you can also earn it through disruption. Okay? So if you want to be powerful, you can choose which type of source that you want your power to come from these 6. Okay? Now, from control, power and authority, we move on to systems approach. And like I said, these are just things that we need to understand in order to appreciate the decision-making process. So what is, first of all, a system? Again, like I said at the beginning, most often we go beyond ourselves, but the body itself is made up of so many systems. Not going far, the body itself is made up of so many systems. And okay, the simple definition of a system is a body of connected parts. And already you can see that an individual therefore qualifies to be a system. You can say a system is a group of related elements and procedures that work together to accomplish a task, and that would more fit an organization. So we have seen those as the 2 definitions of a system. And within a system, there will be what are called subsystems. Again, without going far, within our body, as the body, the whole body as a system, you have various subsystems. You have the nervous system, you have the digestive system, so many systems. And organization is the same. and you have to be aware that there will be these other smaller systems within the big system. Okay? And sometimes it could be that the subsystems are inputs to the bigger system, okay? Yeah. Which is natural because the subsystem make up the whole complete system. The other thing that you need to be aware of is what we call the process cycle in terms of thinking about systems. And each system will have 3 steps where you have inputs, process, and then you have output. An organization of any nature will have these. Will have input, will have the process, and then we'll have the output. A church, again, would have similar stages of process where you have the input, which would be the people, it would be the word, and the processing could be the ministry, could be maybe reading, praying, and the output could be maybe people who are saved, people who are exemplary in society, people who express what the kingdom should be like. So this works for any system that you may come across, the input, process, and output. Organization, individual, people, anything that you name in life, it goes through this process. Feedback comes as a result of shared information, usually to aid in control decision making. And as an example, when we are looking at control, when you are measuring, what you come up with is feedback that will inform you whether you need to make corrections or not. So feedback, simple word, it's what it means, feedback, as we know it, I would say. So why do we need to look at systems approach? Okay? So first of all, the systems thinking encourages development of systematic process in problem solving and decision making, so that we all, if we are in an organization, have got the bigger picture. All, so that we all know that whatever we are doing, wherever we are, again, whether it's in a church, whatever your role in the church is, you should be aware that it's contributing to the bigger picture. So the sum of whatever each individual in the church is doing is contributing to the bigger picture, which is the bigger system. So these could be subsystems, it could be the departments, or it could be individuals. You have to be aware you are contributing to the bigger system. And systems thinking stresses the interconnections and interconnectivity between subsystems, meaning that although you may be in a row, and again I'll give an example of the church, or in a unit where you are in the choir, know that whatever you are doing there, it's contributing to the bigger system, and there is a connection. Which means then that if there is a problem in one of the units or in the subsystem, it will have an effect on the bigger system, on the larger system. So that's why it is encouraged that you have this approach, systems approach or systems thinking in whatever you are doing, meaning that you should be aware that whatever I'm doing is contributing to the total. Systems will have a life cycle like anything that is alive. So you have where it's started in birth, you have growth, you have maturity, you have maybe decline, and eventually you have death. And this is also important to take on board, because in systems thinking, one of your duties would be to make sure the system does not die. Maybe it doesn't become so matured that people are taking things for granted. So that's why, again, we need to appreciate that systems will have a life cycle. So if it reaches a peak, it is time maybe you need to review whether that system is still relevant for the organization, for your organization, church, or any other organization. About last year, I had someone who went to South Africa, and she visited a certain church, and she was sharing how they do their things in a systematic way. So what she told me was, for example, how she was received at the airport, and how all her details were registered, how transport was provided for her to go and launch at the hotel that was booked by the church, and how every day she was given a program of events on what will happen on each particular day, how people are ushered in that particular church, how the choir starts singing before the main word is shared. So you can see that system thinking, it can also maybe work wonders if we take it on board in the work of the church or in church ministry. Now, it's also worth knowing maybe the different types of systems. You have design systems, and an example is computer systems that will be designed. You have human activity systems, and that would be designed for maybe a particular activity. You have natural systems, which include human body, but it will also may include some natural phenomena like the weather. You have abstract systems, which are usually designed using mathematical models or theorems. On the other hand, you also may come across, you don't need to belabor about this, but just in case, you come across some books that talk about hard or soft systems. Or some books may talk about open or closed system. So hard system would be mostly routinized system. Soft would be those that are allowing or are flexible in a way, that are allowing rapid changes. And open, it's the same. It's where the system changes according to changes in the environment. Closed system, usually it's associated with machines, where you put boundaries and the machine will work according to that boundary. It won't allow any changes according to whether the weather outside has changed. So that will be a closed system. It means it can only work on defined parameters. Now we go on to departmentation, and in looking at departmentation, I just want you to think about the definition of departmentation, which I already gave, and why we need to have departments, whether it's in the church or in a work organization. Why do we need departments? Why do we need to divide ourselves into units? And related to departmentation is what is called organization structure. Okay. And again, in thinking about why we need departmentation, we may think about the benefits of departmentation, one of which is communication, but I'll expand on that in a later slide that is coming. And then you also need to think about how you arrive at dividing the organization. Do you just wake up and divide it, or is there a formula that you use? In that sense, most organizations are divided on given basis, which I'll just mention the basic ones, which are more popular as we go along. Okay, so what is an organization? Structure is formed by a grouping of people into departments or sections, and these people be allocated responsibility and authority. Okay? The purpose is that you link individuals. So it could be that you have accountants, so you want to link them together, so you create accountants department or accounts department. And naturally, when there is an accounting job, that means it will be allocated to the accounts department. So another reason you divide the organization is so that you actually know how to allocate tasks or jobs, and also how you then give authority. So you can say anything to do with accounting or money or anything to do with financial reports. The ones that have got authority is the accounting department. Okay? But also, dividing the organization into departments helps in coordination. You actually know when a particular job is being done, where, in which steps, in which department it needs to go. So it makes coordination much easier. It facilitates flow of work, which I've already mentioned. And departmentation came about as a result of what we looked at last session, scientific management or classical approach to management. And again, we look at guys like Frederick Taylor, who brought in division of labor, division of work. You look at, we didn't look at this one, Max Weber, who is known for bureaucratic management, meaning that organization must be rigid in terms of how they do their work. Work must follow a defined pattern. So that's about the bureaucratic management. Henry Fayol brought in principles of management, like the Scala chain that we looked at. That also contributed to the need for dividing the organization into departments, which is called departmentation, which gives rise to organization structure. So we have already looked at span of control, meaning the number of subordinates that report to one boss or one person. That will result into what is called tall or flat organization. If you have few people reporting to one boss, it results into what is called a tall organization, because the steps or the levels will be so many, so it will be a tall structure. While if you have so many people reporting to one person, it will result into what is called a flat organization, because then there will be one person on top, but so many people below him, so it becomes like a flat type of organization. Delayering, these are just terms maybe just for general knowledge. Delayering is about cutting the levels in terms of levels of boss against subordinates in the organization. So if you have a tall organization and you want to reduce it to become a flat organization, you do the process that is called delayering, which sometimes in organization may result into retrenchment or reassignment, where some bosses will be said not to be required, or they will be issued letters that they are not required, so that those that were reporting to them now starts reporting to another boss, and that boss now will have so many people. So that's delayering, but it can happen either way. It doesn't only mean that you are cutting a tall organization. If you have a flat organization and you are now creating more levels, it's still delayering. Okay. In terms of departmentation, there are various bases that are used, like most popular one is where you divide an organization in terms of functional departments, and under functional division of organization or functional departments, usually you have 4 departments. The 4 which are very popular in particular big organization, you may have the finance division, you have the human resources, you have operations, and then the 4th one could be marketing. So usually organizations that divide themselves in terms of functions as a basis, they divide themselves into those 4 departments. Geographical is where you have an organization spread across various, it could be cities or countries. So those cities will have their own structures, and the organization will be said to be divided along geographical basis. Brand, this is more popular with companies. You may have heard of Unilever. It's a very good example where the departments are divided according to brands. So you have where you have cooking oils, you have detergents or soaps, you have other things, maybe hygiene, like Colgate and the like, having their own department. And those who have their managers and all financial people will be under one particular brand department. Matrix is a more modern way of dividing an organization. It's not really a division of an organization. It's a form of trying to make an organization more flexible. So you have this format where particular people in a certain department, instead of reporting to their own boss, will be reporting to several bosses across the organization. So that's called a matrix structure or matrix basis of dividing the organization. Hybrid is where you may incorporate one of, or I should say 2 or 3 of these bases of dividing an organization. So these are just worthy knowing as we go on to see at how you make decisions in the organization or the stages in decision making. It's also worth knowing, I've already mentioned about bureaucracy, and most organizations who are bureaucratic, who are rigid, are said to be mechanistic, and usually they will be slow changing, operating maybe in a stable environment. You no longer, in our modern time, find such organization. There may be just a few, maybe. Organic, normally an organization is said to be organic when it's flexible, is adaptive to whatever is happening in the environment, and changing itself rapidly if there are any changes in the environment. So it's an organization that you would say is open to learning. So it will be said to be organic. Okay. Now, another thing that we need to appreciate in decision making is trying to look at information. And we start with maybe the definition of what information is. And you cannot define information without looking at the definition of data or data. Some people say data. Data or data is raw facts. And the information is data that has been processed to make sense or meaning. So on their own, the data may not make sense, but when they have been processed into information, then they'll have meaning, they'll start to make sense. Usually, you have like figures, and to make sense in some cases, you may need to put them into tables, or you design pie graphs, or just simple graphs for them to make sense. So qualities of valuable information for use in organization decision making. The information should be relevant, complete, clear, accurate, timely, up to date, well presented, and most importantly, it also should not be so costly. So it should be value for money, depending on the capabilities of the organization. Then you also need to know sources of information. You have internal and external sources. So many examples. Internal could be your own records, external could be publication, magazine, and nowadays the internet is watched with a lot of information as external information. Primary or secondary sources. Primary is where you initiate the inquiry yourself as an organization. Secondary is where someone has already initiated the inquiry and you're just acquiring that information. Moving on from there, we also need to know the different levels of information in organization. And basically you have three levels. You have information for the operational level, which is the level down the organization. Tactical information will usually be for the middle level management in the organization, and strategic would be for top management. Depending on the level of information, which is another next slide. Let me go to that. So strategic information will be for top managers. Usually it will be in a very summarized form, and it could be used for plan and control of overall tasks in the organization, or it could be used for the direction of the organization. Tactical would be for middle managers whose task could be to plan and control organization units, and by units we also mean departments. Lower level managers, which is operational, information would be for day-to-day control of the business. Okay? Good information systems will ensure right information is in the right place, with the right people, at the right time, in the right format. Okay? So this is very important, because without information, you can't make decisions. So the right information in the right place, with the right people, at the right time, and in the right format. So what is decision making? Basically, that's the process of choosing a course of action from a set of different alternatives that one believes would be ideal in a given situation. So that's decision making. Okay. So good decision could improve the efficiency in the organization. They may increase effectiveness. There is a difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Okay. And they also, good decision would create and strengthen the competitive advantage for the organization, will improve systems in an organization. Okay. And it will also be able to aid in identifying the different aspects important to the making of the decision themselves. For example, good quality information or systems that have to be put in place in order that good decisions are made. So the process now of making decision, according to H.A. Simon in 1960, he suggested 4 steps. The first one, intelligence, he called it intelligence. That's you search the environment for conditions calling for decision. So you identify those aspects that would require you to make the decision. Or you actually see where decisions are needed to be made. Then you design, which is phase 2, invent, develop, and analyze possible course of action. So you may come up with 1, you may come up with 2, 3, 4 alternatives, solutions of sorting out a problem or of taking advantage of an opportunity. So decision making could be either positive or negative. It could be to solve a problem, or it could be you want to take advantage of an opportunity. Then the third phase is you make a choice between the alternatives that you set in phase 2, and you choose one to say, okay, amongst those, I'll take this course of action. And then phase 4, you review. Yeah. Now, you see some similarities with the control process in a way. That's why we looked at control before we started, or before we came here to look at the process of decision making. So you review your decisions, whether it was the right one, okay, against the results that you obtain. Okay. Now, the link between decision making and information. So decision making is usually based on information. So information will let you know whether a problem and opportunity exists. Okay. Information is also required for you to structure and define the opportunity or problem. It's also used to explore the different alternative solutions for the different course of action that are possible in that given situation. Information is used in coming up with the results, or to ascertain the results after you have made the decision. Okay. So information is at the center of decision-making process. That's why you need to make sure as an organization that you have got good quality information. You have systems that are producing good quality information. General classification of decisions in organization. Again, this is more technical, so it's just for general knowledge. You don't need to belabor about this one. What is important is what we have just seen, the process of making decision, and also we have seen that information is at the center of decision making. This is just for general knowledge. And one of the classification is programmed decision, which will be routine or repetitive. So because they are routine or repetitive, most organizations, they just put them as rules or procedures so that people just follow. And when they are following the rules, they just simply quickly make the decision, or the procedures. When they are following them, they just quickly make the decision. Non-programmed decision, these would be structured. They have a high degree of uncertainty, and usually there may not be rules or procedures to aid the manager to make them. And most likely, this type will be at the very top of the organization, where you have a high risk or uncertainty. But you may also have what are called semi-structured decision, which you, in modern times, these are common, maybe at all levels of the organization. So these are, and some more categorization of decision, programmed or non-programmed, which is similar to what we have already seen. And you also hear of people saying consumer decision making, meaning the decision that you make when you are buying things, business or organizational decision making, which is what we have concentrated in looking at today. Personal decision making, these in our daily exchange as people, we usually talk about making decisions about relationships or other decisions. And you also hear of people talking about basic or routine decision. And in organization, you have policy decision, administrative or executive decision. These would be different from one organization to the other. A policy decision in one organization may not be a policy decision in another organization. So there are so many things that will make a decision to be put in a category such as policy, administrative, or executive, depending on the organization, like I say. So you have also strategic decisions, tactical, operation according to the level of management. Then you have major and minor, mostly to do with personal attributes. And you have individual decision making, where one person is making the decision, or group decision making, so much associated with group think and the like. Okay, so contribution of effective decision making to organization. Why do we need to master the process of decision making? We have already looked at making sure that our processes are effective, our results are effective, and we have efficiency in the organization. So effective decision making will make our organization processes to be more efficient. But it also may contribute to profitability. And in modern day or nowadays, profitability is a word that is used in private organization as well as charitable organization. So even in church, you can use that word profitability. It just means that you are not going overboard, trying to spend what you are not making. So if you are remaining with surplus in whatever setting, nowadays more people talk about profitability. That's why you hear more and more of NHS making profits, which was unheard of. It's because the word is now being used across the board. Cost benefits, you also be able to analyze the costs within the organization, but also the aspect that you save a lot of money if you have a very good structure process of making decisions. And it could also lead to fast response and therefore good customer service. Again, this also relates to church, where you are making sure that if there are things, they are sorted out fast. If there are opportunities, you are taking advantage of them quickly. If there is information to share, it's being done quickly. Now, quickly, I'm almost near my hour. So quickly, there are tools that are used sometimes to aid in decision making. One of them is a flow diagram. In fact, those who have studied computer programming might have seen that a computer makes decision using flow diagrams where you have yes and no's. Okay, so you have maybe a question, and then if the answer is yes, you take a different route. If the answer is no, you take another route. So those could be, or that can be, an example of flow diagram. Decision trees can also be used for making decisions. And they are almost similar to flow diagrams where you have a tree, but you have different branches depending on questions. Again, it could be yes or no questions. If it's no, you take the branch to the left. If it's a yes, maybe you're taking the branch to the right. SWOT analysis, which is your analysis as an organization, but also individual, of your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities that are available out there, and threats that are available out there. That can also help in making decisions. Mind maps, where maybe in a meeting you are just asked questions and you scribble down whatever is coming. Some people use decision cards. Okay, and in our modern day, again, we have software, computer software that more and more being used to making decisions. I was surprised, particularly in banks here, they don't even want to see people. All decisions, including issuing of letters, is done through computers who make a decision according to information that is fed into them about financial status of a company or an individual. Then the computer will make a decision, issue a letter, and you receive a letter. There are also various techniques used depending on the organization capability and level of knowledge, like the Pareto rule, which is 20-80 rule. There are so many that are used, techniques that are used in decision making. But like I said, it's better to stick to the more practical, to the more simpler, unless if it's a very large organization, then maybe you can employ the more mathematical computer decision-making software. There ends my presentation on the process of decision-making. Like I said, most important is the process, but also knowing that information is at the center of the process of making decision. So if you have got quality information, then the decisions that you are going to make will be also of high quality. Thank you so much for listening. If there are any questions, available to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Very powerful session again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very, very powerful session.
You are muted there.
What I said, decision making. What is the 3-step? Let's see who has catch it. Decision making process. Where do we start? Okay, you are muted. I was wondering that how can we have a damn class? I think I've asked you to unmute Sister Alice there. Okay, just unmute yourselves. I think we just wanted to mute